Aisle 7 rush. Aisle 7 at SaveMart was a maelstrom of fluorescent lights and frantic energy. Shopping carts, each a metallic beast laden with groceries, collided in a chaotic ballet. The air hung thick with the combined scents of overripe bananas, industrial cleaner, and the faint, ever-present aroma of day-old rotisserie chicken. Kevin Miller, manning Register 5, felt the familiar knot of tension tighten in his shoulders. Friday evening. The bane of his existence. He scanned a jar of pickles with unnecessary force, the beep echoing through the din. Next, he barked, his voice a little too loud, a little too sharp. A woman with a mountain of coupons and a perpetually disapproving frown shuffled forward. "Are you new here?" she snapped, before even unloading her cart. "You don't seem to know what you're doing." Kevin resisted the urge to roll his eyes. "Just trying to get everyone through as quickly as possible, He plastered on what he hoped was a charming smile, but probably came across as a grimace. The woman harumphed, beginning her slow, deliberate unloading process, each item placed on the conveyor belt with the precision of a brain surgeon. Kevin watched, his fingers drumming a silent rhythm against the counter. A child in the next lane wailed, the sound piercing the supermarket's cacophony. "Do you accept these?" the woman demanded, brandishing a stack of coupons that looked suspiciously like they'd been printed at home. Kevin sighed inwardly. "Let's see them." He knew this was going to be a long one. He meticulously examined each coupon, cross-referencing expiration dates and product specifications. The line behind her snaked further down aisle 7, a collective mass of impatient sighs and shifting feet. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he totaled her order. "That'll be $47.82. She rummaged through her oversized purse, pulling out a wad of crumpled bills and a handful of loose change. "I think I have a coupon for another $1 off," she said, her eye scanning the bottom of her bag, oblivious to the growing line of angry customers. Kevin bit back a sharp retort. "Please. There are other people waiting." "Well, I'm trying to save money," she snapped back. "Can't a person try to save money these days?" He scanned the additional coupon, deducted the $1, and finally processed her payment. As she gathered her bags, she shot him a triumphant look. "See? Every little bit helps." Kevin mumbled a barely audible, "Have a nice day," as the next customer, a teenage boy with a basket overflowing with sugary snacks, stepped forward. The boy was glued to his phone, barely acknowledging Kevin's existence. "Subtotal is $18.55, Kevin announced, already feeling the familiar burn of frustration creeping up his neck. The boy rummaged in his pockets, finally pulling out a crumpled 20. Kevin took the bill, made change, and handed it to him. The boy snatched it without a word, still engrossed in his phone. "Next!" Kevin called out, his voice sharper this time. An elderly man with a kind face and a slightly bewildered expression shuffled forward, pushing a cart containing only a loaf of bread and a carton of eggs. Kevin's already frayed patience snapped. "Come on, Grandpa, let's get a move on. Some of us have places to be." He scanned the bread and eggs with unnecessary force, the beep of the scanner unusually loud in the sudden quiet. The man with the empty wallet. Mr. Peterson ambled toward Kevin's register, the small wicker basket tapping softly against his leg. Inside rested a curated selection: eggs, sourdough, a solitary, flawless avocado. The best joys were simple, he'd often declare. Kevin, already wrestling with a tardy schedule and the looming gluten-free cracker quest of Mrs. Henderson, observed his approach with a drumming impatience against the belt. Here came another snag. He pasted on his most convincing approximation of a smile, which felt more like a snarl held back. "Next," he announced, the cheer perhaps overdone. Peterson offered a smile in return, his eyes creasing pleasantly. "Afternoon, young man," he greeted, his voice a dry rustle, like autumn leaves skittering across concrete. He settled his basket on the counter with painstaking precision, then began a methodical search of his person. Jacket, then slacks, a process Kevin found agonizingly protracted. "Everything all right, sir?" Kevin inquired, his smile's integrity wavering. Just a moment," Peterson murmured, his brow furrowed. He explored his inner coat pocket, then the opposite one. Empty. He even gave his rear pockets a hopeful tap, yielding only fluff and a crumpled tissue. Good heavens, he uttered, a hint of alarm coloring his tone. I appear to have misplaced my wallet. Kevin's internal pressure soared. Just what he didn't need. He flicked his gaze to the burgeoning line. A woman with twins in a double stroller released a theatrical sigh. A teen, lost in his phone, scrolled with agitated thumbs. The air around the checkout felt suddenly close, suffocating. Perhaps it's in your vehicle, sir, Kevin suggested, striving for neutrality. Peterson shook his head, crestfallen. I walked today. Beautiful weather, you know. Didn't want the bother of the car. He resumed his patting, the gesture bordering on frantic. I'm terribly sorry, he apologized, his gaze darting between Kevin and the growing queue. I haven't a clue where it could be. Irritation flared within Kevin. This held up everything. He felt the collective gaze of the other patrons like hot coals on his skin. Sir, I really need to keep things moving, he stated, the sharpness of his words betraying him. Perhaps step aside and double-check? We can serve the next person. Peterson's shoulders slumped ever so slightly. He appeared genuinely distraught. I understand, he said quietly. It's just... I can't imagine where it's gone. He paused, his gaze fixed on the floor tiles. Perhaps I should just return these items. The woman with the twins emitted a low groan. Kevin's jaw tightened. He loathed these scenarios. He hated feeling cornered, burdened with others' mishaps. He hated the silent judgments, the implicit accusations of inefficiency. Listen, he said, his voice strained. Just check one more time. Really, really well. He watched, his patience fraying, as Peterson recommenced his pocket exploration. This time, however, a glimmer of hope flickered in the old man's eyes. Words unspoken, words regretted. Kevin Miller's fingers drummed a frantic rhythm on the checkout counter, each tap echoing his growing frustration. Mr. Peterson, a kindler-faced man with a shock of white hair, was fumbling through his worn leather wallet. A 5. Another 5. Pennies scattered like fallen leaves. Take your time, Kevin muttered, the sarcasm thick enough to spread on toast. He punctuated the sentence with a loud, theatrical sigh, loud enough that the young woman behind Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably. Mr. Peterson's head snapped up, his eyes, usually twinkling with good humor, now clouded with a fleeting look of hurt. Oh, dear. I do apologize. It seems I'm a bit slower than I used to be. He dropped a handful of change, the metallic clatter adding to the awkwardness. Kevin rolled his eyes, a gesture he knew Mr. Peterson couldn't miss. Yeah, well, some of us have places to be. It's not exactly rocket science to count out $23.78. A murmur rippled through the line. An elderly woman with a shopping cart full of cat food glared at Kevin. The young woman behind Mr. Peterson pursed her lips, her eyes narrowing. The air in the small convenience store seemed to thicken with disapproval. Mr. Peterson's shoulders slumped slightly. He finally managed to gather the correct amount, his hands trembling as he placed the crumpled bills and loose change on the counter. I'm so sorry, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper. My eyesight isn't what it used to be, and sometimes things just slip my mind. Kevin snatched the money, not bothering to make eye contact. The scanner beeped, each sound sharp and accusatory. Here's your receipt, he said, shoving the slip of paper across the counter. Next! As Mr. Peterson shuffled away, his steps slow and unsteady, Kevin felt a prickle of unease. He usually prided himself on his customer service, on being the friendly face at the end of a long day. But today, the relentless stream of demanding customers, the buzzing fluorescent lights, and the gnawing worry about his overdue rent had chipped away at his patience, leaving him raw and irritable. He glanced at the next customer, a woman with screaming twins, and plastered on a fake smile. but the image of Mr. Peterson's crestfallen face lingered in his mind, a dark stain on his conscience. The man hadn't done anything wrong, hadn't been rude or demanding. He was just old, a little slow, and trying to navigate a world that wasn't always kind to those who struggled. The weight of his unkind words settled heavily on Kevin's chest. He knew, with a sinking feeling, that he had made a mistake he couldn't take back. The words, once spoken, hung in the air like a toxic cloud, poisoning the atmosphere and leaving a bitter taste in his mouth. A few dollars short. Mr. Peterson patted his pockets, a slow, rhythmic tap-tap-tap against the worn fabric of his trousers. A small knot of anxiety tightened in his chest. Where was it? He'd been so careful to put it away after buying that little birdhouse kit for his granddaughter. Finally, his fingers brushed against the familiar leather. Relief washed over him. "Ah, here we are," he mumbled, pulling out his wallet. Kevin Miller, the cashier, drummed his fingers impatiently on the checkout counter. The line behind Mr. Peterson snaked halfway down the aisle, a testament to the grocery store's understaffing and his own bad luck. He was already running late for his date. He watched the old man fumble with the clasp on his wallet, each second stretching into an eternity. Mr. Peterson opened the wallet and began counting the bills, his brow furrowing with each one. A worried expression spread across his face, creasing the wrinkles around his kind eyes. He recounted, slower this time, his lips moving silently. The knot in his chest tightened further. "Is there a problem, sir?" Kevin asked, his voice laced with thinly veiled irritation. Mr. Peterson looked up, startled. "Oh, I'm so sorry, young man. I seem to be a few dollars short." He held up the small stack of bills, a mixture of ones and fives. "I thought I had enough." Kevin's eyes rolled almost imperceptibly. "A few dollars short," he repeated, his tone implying that this was the most ridiculous thing he'd heard all day. He gestured to the line behind Mr. Peterson with a dramatic sweep of his arm. "Seriously?" Mr. Peterson flushed, the blood rising in his cheeks. He hated causing a fuss. "Perhaps I could put something back," he suggested meekly, his voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigerators. He scanned the items on the conveyor belt, his gaze settling on the carton of eggs. Clara needed those eggs for her baking club this weekend. "Just hurry it up, old-timer," a voice grumbled from the back of the line. Kevin, emboldened by the unseen support, sighed loudly. "Look, I don't have all day. Either pay or put something back. And please, be quick about it." He tapped his foot, his impatience radiating off him in waves. The artificial lighting of the grocery store seemed to amplify his agitation, casting harsh shadows on his face. Mr. Peterson's shoulders slumped slightly. He reached for the eggs, his hand trembling. "I'll just take these off then." "The little helper." Kevin Miller sighed, the sound amplified by the otherwise quiet grocery store. Mr. Peterson was at it again, counting out pennies like they were gold nuggets. "Sir," Kevin said, his voice dripping with forced patience, "there's a line forming. Are you going to pay for all that, or—" He trailed off, letting the implication hang heavy in the air. Mr. Peterson's brow furrowed. He glanced nervously at the growing queue behind him, then back at the small pile of coins on the counter. I thought I had enough," he mumbled, his voice barely audible above the hum of the refrigerators. He began recounting the coins, his hands trembling slightly. Kevin tapped his fingers impatiently on the checkout counter. "Look, Pops, just put something back. It's not rocket science." He gestured dismissively at the basket filled with simple groceries, a loaf of bread, a can of soup, a small carton of milk. "Essentials." Mr. Peterson's shoulders slumped. He picked up the can of soup, his gaze fixed on the label as if memorizing it. The fluorescent lights of the store seemed to amplify the lines on his face, etching deeper the years of worry and hardship. He placed the can on the counter, away from the items he could afford. Lily Rodriguez, standing a few customers back with her mother, watched the scene unfold. The heat rose in her cheeks, a familiar flush that signaled her rising anger. The cashier's callousness felt like a physical blow. She tightened her grip on her mother's hand. "Mom," she whispered, her voice tight with indignation. "That's not right." Her mother, preoccupied with a text message, glanced up briefly. "What, honey?" Lily gestured subtly towards Mr. Peterson and Kevin. "He's making fun of that man. He's being mean." Her mother sighed, her attention already drifting back to her phone. "Lily, don't stare. It's not polite." But Lily couldn't look away. Mr. Peterson was now carefully placing the remaining items into a worn canvas bag. The disappointment in his eyes was palpable. "That'll be $3.78, Kevin announced, his voice devoid of any warmth. Mr. Peterson fumbled in his pocket, pulling out a few crumpled bills. He handed them to Kevin, his hand shaking slightly. "That's not enough," Kevin said flatly, not even bothering to count. Lily stepped forward, pulling away from her mother. "Excuse me," she said, her voice surprisingly clear and strong. Kevin rolled his eyes. "What do you want, kid?" Lily ignored him, turning her attention to Mr. Peterson. "Sir," she said, her voice soft but firm, "I'd like to pay for the rest of your groceries." Mr. Peterson looked at her, his eyes wide with surprise. "Oh, no, dear. I couldn't possibly," Lily smiled, a genuine, warm smile that reached her eyes. "Please. I want to." She turned to Kevin. "How much is it?" Kevin, clearly annoyed by the interruption, mumbled, $1.42. Lily reached into her own small purse, pulling out a $5 bill. She placed it on the counter. "Here you go. A name from the past." "Are you quite certain, dear?" Mr. Peterson queried, his gaze darting between Lily's eager face and the bulging grocery bag straining in her grasp. "I wouldn't dream of inconveniencing you." Lily resettled her hold, her chin lifting with resolve. "No inconvenience at all, Mr. Peterson. Truly. Happy to lend a hand, and I'm headed that direction in any case." A tiny white lie, born of kindness. A shiver passed through his aged fingers as they brushed hers on the bag's worn handle. "Well, if you're positive. I can't begin to express my gratitude." His eyes, the color of faded denim, suddenly shimmered with gathering moisture. He averted his gaze, seemingly ashamed of the unexpected emotion. "This old frame ain't what it once was." He shuffled along beside her as they set off, his gait measured and slow. The afternoon sunlight painted elongated shadows that danced around them, turning the pavement to shades of ochre and gold. The air hummed with the fragrance of freshly mown lawns and the vibrant perfume of petunias cascading from Mrs. Gable's award-winning garden. Abruptly, a sharp gasp sliced through the tranquil atmosphere. Eleanor, who had been dawdling a few steps behind, froze, her hand flying to her lips. Her eyes, wide with incredulity, were riveted on Mr. Peterson. Lily glanced back, concern wrinkling her brow. "Eleanor? Is everything all right?" Eleanor appeared deaf to her question. She edged forward, her voice a mere thread of sound. "Arthur? Arthur Peterson? Can it truly be you?" Mr. Peterson halted, a furrow deepening his brow. He scrutinized Eleanor, his gaze speculative. "Do I know you, madam?" "Forgive me, but my memory isn't what it once was." Eleanor surged forward, her voice gaining volume. "It's Eleanor Hayes. From the Historical Society? Surely you recall? We spoke at the War Memorial dedication. You were there. You delivered the keynote." Recognition sparked in Mr. Peterson's eyes, a long dormant flame flickering back to life. "Eleanor Hayes. My stars. Time certainly flies, doesn't it?" A faint smile graced his lips. Eleanor, however, wore no smile. She seemed to vibrate with disbelief, tinged with a peculiar blend of outrage and respect. "Arthur Peterson," she declared, her voice ringing with conviction, "is a highly decorated war veteran. He received the Silver Star for extraordinary valor in the Pacific. He spared countless lives. He's a local institution." Lily's jaw slackened. She gaped at Mr. Peterson, then at Eleanor, her mind racing to assimilate this revelation. Mr. Peterson, this unassuming, gentle soul who struggled with his groceries, a bona fide hero? He colored, his hand fluttering nervously like a trapped bird. Now, Eleanor, there's really no call for such a to-do. That was a lifetime ago. A to-do? Eleanor sputtered, her voice escalating. This isn't a to-do, Arthur. This is about the reverence you deserve. It's about acknowledging the selflessness you displayed for this nation. People have the right to know your story. She wheeled to face Lily, her eyes blazing with fervor. He's a genuine American hero, Lily. A true exemplar of courage. The weight of regret. Kevin's fingers, poised to punch in the next customer's order, froze midair. The certificate, held delicately in Mr. Peterson's trembling hands, swam into focus. Medal of Honor, the embossed lettering proclaimed. Below it, a citation detailing acts of extraordinary heroism in a conflict Kevin barely remembered from history class. Silence descended, heavy and absolute. The murmur of the grocery store, the beeping of scanners, the clatter of carts, all faded into a muffled background hum. Kevin's breath hitched. He stared, dumbfounded, at the frail man before him, a man he had just moments ago treated with such blatant disrespect. Mr. Peterson, oblivious to the internal turmoil he had unleashed, simply smiled. Just wanted to use this coupon, son. Help stretch the pension, you know. He chuckled, a soft, papery sound. Lily, who had been gathering the last of Mr. Peterson's groceries into a reusable bag, looked up at Kevin. Her brow was furrowed, her usual bright eyes clouded with a quiet disappointment. She didn't say anything, but her gaze held a weight that settled heavily on Kevin's conscience. He knew, with a sinking certainty, that she had witnessed the entire exchange. He swallowed, his throat suddenly dry. The words "I'm sorry" caught, trapped somewhere between his lungs and his lips. They felt utterly inadequate, pathetic even, in the face of the reality that had just crashed down upon him. Lily finished packing and gently handed the bag to Mr. Peterson. Here you go, Mr. Peterson. Have a wonderful day. She turned back to Kevin, her voice soft but firm. Everyone deserves kindness, Kevin. Especially those who have given so much. The words were a gentle reprimand, a stark contrast to the searing condemnation Kevin knew he deserved. He finally found his voice, a hoarse whisper. Mr. Peterson. I didn't realize. Mr. Peterson waved a dismissive hand. No harm done, son. We all have our bad days. He paused, his gaze softening. Just try to remember that everyone you meet is fighting their own battle, all right? With a final nod, he shuffled away, pushing his cart slowly towards the exit. Kevin watched him go, the weight of regret pressing down on him like a physical burden. Shame washed over him, a bitter tide that threatened to drown him in self-reproach. The image of Mr. Peterson, hunched and frail, juxtaposed against the powerful words on the certificate, burned in his mind. He had judged this man, dismissed him as a burden, when in reality, he was a hero. A man who had faced unimaginable horrors, and still managed to retain a gentle spirit. He glanced at Lily, who was now pointedly organizing the candy bars on the checkout display. Her silence was more cutting than any shouted accusation. He knew he had disappointed her, and that hurt more than anything. An apology and a smile. The fluorescent lights of the supermarket hummed, a stark contrast to the sudden stillness that had fallen over checkout lane 5. Kevin Miller's face, usually a mask of bored indifference, was now flushed a deep crimson. He fidgeted with the scanner, avoiding Mr. Peterson's gaze. The weight of his earlier outburst pressed down on him, heavier than any overflowing shopping cart. He cleared his throat. Mr. Peterson, he began, his voice barely a whisper. He tried again, louder this time. Mr. Peterson, I owe you an apology. He finally looked up. Mr. Peterson's eyes, though crinkled with age, held no malice, only a gentle curiosity. That made it even harder. I was completely out of line. What I said was rude and disrespectful, and it was wrong of me to judge you like that. Especially after learning about your service." The words tumbled out, a messy, awkward confession. He didn't mention the news article, the online comments, or the growing dread that had been building in his stomach all afternoon. He just focused on the man in front of him. He took a deep breath. "I'm truly sorry, sir. I hope you can forgive me." The silence stretched, punctuated only by the beeping of the self-checkout lanes in the distance. Kevin braced himself, expecting a lecture, a scolding, anything but the quiet understanding he saw in Mr. Peterson's eyes. Then, a slow, warm smile spread across Mr. Peterson's face, chasing away the lines of worry. It was a smile that spoke of resilience, of a life lived with both hardship and grace. "Kevin, wasn't it?" Mr. Peterson said, his voice a little raspy but kind. "Apology accepted." He chuckled softly. "We all have our moments. And sometimes, a little reminder is all we need to get back on track." He reached out a hand, his fingers gnarled with age, and gently clasped Kevin's. The touch was surprisingly firm. "Don't dwell on it, son. Just learn from it." The tension that had been coiled tight in Kevin's chest began to unwind. He felt a wave of relief wash over him, so potent it almost made him weak. He managed a shaky smile in return. "Thank you, Mr. Peterson. I will." He finished scanning Mr. Peterson's groceries, his movements now deliberate and careful. He bagged them with extra care, placing the bread on top so it wouldn't get crushed. As Mr. Peterson paid, he fumbled slightly with his wallet. Kevin resisted the urge to rush him. He waited patiently, a stark contrast to his earlier impatience. "Have a good day, Kevin," Mr. Peterson said as he gathered his bags. "And thank you for the groceries." "You too, Mr. Peterson," Kevin replied, his voice sincere. "Take care." As Mr. Peterson walked away, Kevin watched him go, a strange mix of humility and gratitude swirling within him. The fluorescent light still hummed, but somehow, the sound wasn't quite so grating anymore. The weight on his chest had lifted, replaced by a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. Maybe, just maybe, he could learn from this. Maybe he could be a better person. He took a deep breath and called out, "Next!" The next customer approached, a young woman with a mountain of diapers and baby formula. Kevin plastered on a genuine smile, a far cry from the forced pleasantries he usually offered. He scanned her items with renewed focus, determined to make amends, one customer at a time. A lesson learned. The paper gave way with a sharp tear as Kevin hoisted the bag. Apples burst forth, a crimson tide surging across the blacktop towards Mr. Peterson's scuffed, earth-toned shoes. "Gosh, I'm so sorry, sir." Mortified, Kevin lunged to corral the scattered fruit, a blush creeping up his neck. A raspy chuckle escaped Mr. Peterson. "Think nothing of it, son. We all have our clumsy moments. Though mine seem to be increasing in frequency these days." He stooped gingerly, a grimace flickering across his face, and retrieved a lone apple, buffing it against the fabric of his slacks. "Looks like a good one, eh?" Guilt twisted in Kevin's gut. After his earlier display of impatience, the least he could offer was assistance. "Allow me, please." He gathered the remaining apples, carefully nestling them back into the ripped bag. He'd need to cradle it like precious cargo now. "Thanks, young man. That's mighty decent of you," Mr. Peterson said, smiling warmly. The corners of his eyes deepened with fine lines. "My joints aren't what they used to be, that's for sure." Kevin clutched the bag, striving for an even distribution of weight. "Where are you parked, Mr. Peterson?" "I'll be glad to carry these." Mr. Peterson blinked, a momentary haze clouding his gaze. "Ah, right. Just yonder, near the streetlight. I'm always misremembering. Sign of the times, I suppose." As they ambled forward, silence hung between them, thick with Kevin's unspoken apology and the older man's quiet resilience. Kevin concentrated on keeping the groceries steady. The sun blazed on the back of his neck, prickling his skin. He noticed Mr. Peterson's hesitant gait, the slight hunch of his shoulders, the occasional hand reaching for support against the parked vehicles. They reached a powder blue sedan, its paint faded by years of sun and weather. Mr. Peterson wrestled with his keys, finally unlocking the trunk with a soft click. Kevin gently deposited the apples inside. "Thank you again, Kevin," Mr. Peterson said, his voice imbued with sincerity. "I truly don't know what I would have done without your help." Kevin's throat constricted. "It was nothing, really, sir." He longed to atone for his earlier behavior, but the words seemed locked behind his teeth. How could he articulate the wave of irritation that had swept over him? How could he confess to judging this man based on appearances alone? Mr. Peterson seemed to sense the internal struggle. He squeezed Kevin's arm, his grip surprisingly firm. "You're a fine young man, Kevin. Don't let anyone ever tell you otherwise." He paused, his gaze drifting off into the distance. "Life has a way of throwing us for a loop. We all stumble. The trick is to pick ourselves up and learn from it." With a final, knowing nod, Mr. Peterson slid into his car and turned the key. Kevin watched as the blue sedan eased out of its space and disappeared down the road. He remained there, the heat of the pavement rising through his shoes like a fever. Mr. Peterson's words echoed in his mind. Learn from it. He replayed his interaction with Mr. Peterson, the impatience in his voice, the dismissive inflection. He considered the assumptions he had hastily constructed, the prejudices he had unknowingly harbored. A profound sense of remorse washed over him, settling like lead in his stomach. He understood then that respect wasn't a reward to be earned, but a fundamental right to be given. And kindness wasn't weakness, but fortitude. Blinded by his own concerns, he had failed to recognize the humanity standing right before him. Kevin vowed, in that instant, to change. To cultivate patience, empathy, and compassion. To treat everyone, irrespective of age or outward presentation, with the esteem and consideration they deserved. The resolution was simple, yet felt revolutionary. A burden lifted, replaced by a newfound sense of purpose. He turned back toward the store, the sunset painting elongated shadows before him, a newfound resolve hardening his expression. He had much to learn, but he was ready to begin the education.